Nailers. Hi, I'm Steffi from Across the Pond and Back. Welcome. And we're going to kick off with guess where. Cheers. Oh, I love a draft Guinness. I really miss that, but actually, you can get that in the States, but something about getting it in an English pub. But yeah, British pub and British culture. So here I am, cozying on down for a little while after work, and it's very much the pub and the pub culture here in Britain, and I'll speak for England, but I reckon most of UK is very much community based and meaning. So people will literally just drop in after work. It's common knowledge to Brits, but in the States, they have some wonderful bars, if that's what you like. But they're usually things like sports bars or diners, things like that, or novelty bars, and they can be really interesting, really fascinating, and really on the ball, with different cocktails and things. But the actual pub culture is what I'm talking about in Britain. If you hear any noise in the background, I'm sorry, but it's pretty noisy in here already, and it's only early evening. So quite popular. And I just wanted to share a little bit with you about the pub culture. So apparently, pub culture and pubs generally, they started about 2,000 years ago by who? Guess who? The Romans. So the Romans came here with all their ingenuity and their wisdom. And apparently, before that, we were just a bunch of heathens. Well, that's how the history books really portray it for the English kids. Uh, and so, yeah, the Romans brought their roads, they brought their swimming baths or public swimming pools, and the pub. So originally they were from Italy. The idea of the public house, which is where pub comes from, public house where anyone and everyone could just pop in. But apparently they started in Italy as like wine places where you could buy wine, first of all. And I think the word was tabernet. But tabernet evolved into a pub, and these pubs, the early pubs, evolved into drinking wine and having wine consumed on the premises by anybody, basically. I don't think they had licenses in those days. So, and then of course the British, with their passion for ales, real ales, by the way, lager came later, which the Americans love their lighter beers and their lagers, but they're quite different from the British ales. So, yeah, the ales came into the picture, the arena, and here we are with wines and ales, and then other things came later. So apparently, this is how it all started. Now, I was thinking about all the countries that I visited in Europe, and of course lived in the USA. I've seen enough over there to compare the bars to the pubs and the bars in Europe. So overall, I still maintain that for the pubs anyway, and the pub culture, the whole feeling of coming into a pub, whether it's an old fashion pub like this one is. It was originally built, I think, probably about 300 years ago, but it was built for the bricklayers who used to come in after work and have a pint. Excuse me a minute. Whoops. I've only had a sip and I'm dropping my book. No, I literally have only had a sip. So you can joke about that. Yeah, so basically that's how pubs started. Looking up at the ceilings as well, because sometimes we miss a lot when we come into these pubs. We miss looking at the beams and the ceilings and things. So I enjoy all that. That's all part of it for me, is to go into a place. And what amazes me is some of the pub names. Any Americans who visited the UK have probably noticed that we have some really funny, weird names. Okay, so one of the ones that I was going to suggest that you look up is called the Little Gem, and it's in Aylesford, Kent. And the Little Gem is such a typical essentially, haven't got that right either, have I? Oh, so quintessentially, that's right. English pub. I mean, on the outside, on the inside, even the doorway is about 4 foot something. So I'm only 5'4", but I have to watch my head as I go underneath there. My dad certainly did. He was like 6 foot. So there's a lot of quaint old features that all impact the experience of coming in. So when these guys from Britain come in, it's all very second nature to them. But when you've been away from it for a while, like I was, and then you come back, it's quite a fascination and quite an enjoyable experience. I went into a pub about a month ago to meet a long-time friend from Wales, and it was just amazing. They had a roaring fire, and it was just really, really lovely. Nothing much had changed since the last time I've been in those types of places. So I really enjoyed it just for the atmosphere, you know. And of course, nowadays they have food and, you know, all that going on. And, you know, we have our Sunday roast dinners and things like that. That's another subject, the Sunday roast. So I would love to share with you what goes into that every weekend. It's like having a Thanksgiving almost every weekend. But we don't all have them, but they're there if we want them. If we want to book one in a pub and go and have a pint and a Sunday roast, it's just a nice thing to do if you're able to do it. All right, so apparently I was reading about the history of pubs a little bit. And there was this king, this Saxon king actually, who came along and decided that, hey, there's just too much drinking going on freely here. We need to measure it out. So he actually was the originator of this shot, the idea of the concept of the shot, apparently. So all this happened in little old England all those years ago. And nowadays we have the shots, of course, well known, but apparently that was called a peg. So I looked it up. You can look it up, but it's actually amazing because the saying "take you down a peg or two" is a little bit aggressive, admittedly, but I've heard that said quite a bit of time over the time here in England. Oh, I'm going to take you down a peg or two. Well, that saying actually comes from that, apparently. So this Saxon king, he made this shot called the peg, and then the taking down a peg or two was, you know, getting you to sober up or getting you to behave. All right, so number 2, Christmas food, and in particular, mince pies. As I notice in the States, of course, they have good stuff over there. They have some nice food, especially on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving to me is just unbeatable. It's probably my number one ever holiday in the USA. I like the 4th of July, kind of. It doesn't bother me, by the way, that they're celebrating the Brits moving out. Lots of people have asked me that. Lots of Americans asking me that over my time. I do not care. Obviously, I care about people, you know, and I care about how history is represented and all that stuff. But I'm not, you know, it doesn't bother me. It does not offend me any at all. In fact, I love the fireworks. I just love the notion of it, how the Americans keep with the 4th of July every single year. But anyway, I digress again. So the mince pies and Christmas cake. So when I was in Florida, I was always on the lookout for these types of things. I noticed they were conspicuous by their absence. So when I used to go and look for, say, a jar of mincemeat to make my own mince pies, because I could see that I wasn't going to get them, probably. Now, remember, this was 2004 to, you know, for a few years down the line. It was early days in terms of big stores like Publix getting in their international aisle. There's a shout out for Publix over there, because they are good with international foods nowadays. But when I first went there, they didn't have jars of mincemeat and marmite and those types of things that we just couldn't normally get. So I went to Walmart one day and I asked this really super friendly, as they are usually, customer service lady walking around. And I said, well, could you please show me where I can get some mincemeat, please? So she just led me to the minced beef area. So, of course, I really appreciate her help. She was acting on her knowledge. Totally. I totally get that. Didn't laugh at her or anything. I'm just reporting that as part of the story that they have, maybe nowadays, but then they had no clue that mincemeat was actually a little mixture of dry fruit and brandy sometimes and like candied peel, stuff like that. So I smiled and I said, thank you very much. But eventually I did find some and I went home and made my own mince pies because I was missing them so much. Maybe nowadays you can get them. I know you can get them through online. You can certainly get them. And there are companies now that specialize in packaging English, British foods and sending them out because there's quite a few Brits over in the USA. So that's a good thing. But in my experience, there's nothing like the British mince pies, the Christmas cakes. Now, I was wondering why, maybe somebody in American who's American can answer me this question. Why do you guys not have rich fruit cake very much? I'm not saying never. Maybe someone will just speak up and say, oh, yeah, definitely, we have that. What are you talking about? But in my area, where I was in the south, it was extremely hard to get any decent, anyway, rich fruit cake like Christmas cake is. And I certainly couldn't get any with marzipan and icing on there. So I was really missing that. And again, I ended up having to wait till my dear daughter, my older daughter, came over to visit, and she brought the Christmas cake with her. So there is a bit of a story with that, actually. When she was at the airport, I can't remember which airport, and of course, USA, they're very tight on things, which is usually a very good thing. It can be a bit formidable sometimes, but for anyone who's just coming in with nothing to worry about, it's fine. So of course they did their questioning with my daughter about which food she had brought with her. And this guy was kind of playing with her because he was just saying, I think I'm going to take it. Oh, and she took him literally. Feel so sad that this happened, but eventually he just smiled and cracked open his laugh and said, nah, you take it. So they probably have a few games like that with that kind of thing. But anyway, so that was the length that I had to go to get the Christmas cake in Florida. But nowadays, it's probably much easier. But I think the American fruitcake is nowhere near as good as the English fruitcake. Plus the fact that we tend to, if we're making it ourselves, which I did a few times over there, and I've made it in the past, where you just laden it down with some brandy and let it sit for a few months. So yeah, that's the traditional way of making Christmas cake. And then about 3 or 4 weeks before, I think I remember my nan doing this. She actually had a timetable for her Christmas cake making. She used to have it down to the T, where she used to say, think a couple of weeks, yeah, we're ready to marzipan now. And then, oh, we can't ice it until the marzipan's dried. So it was quite a specialist art making Christmas cake. So sadly, not too many of us do that anymore. But yeah, it was a very much a very special thing. So Christmas food, pigs in a blanket. Do you know what they are? Brits do, I would think, for the most part. But yeah, pigs in a blanket, that kind of thing. Tiny little chipolata sausages or small little sausages with streaky bacon wound around, and then we just roast them with the dinner. Right, so I did find out recently a fun fact about Christmas cake just before I move on. I was wondering myself why I could hardly ever find a Christmas cake out of season. So if I want to go in March and grab myself a Christmas cake for a few weeks, can't find one. And thinking about the popularity of them, I'm wondering, well, I wonder why that is. Found out it's Queen Victoria. So our history of kings and queens over the years, they've impacted our life more than we really know. So apparently Queen Victoria had decided that there was too much going on, too much jollity maybe, and fighting possibly, stuff going on where she felt like she had to ban the 12th day of Christmas. So she apparently went ahead and banned it, and then, in other words, nothing could be sold about Christmas after that. Now, that's what I read. So if anyone would like to let me know if they read anything different or if they think that's wrong information, let me know. But I was really fascinated about that. Okay, it is actually quite warm in here, so feeling a bit hot, actually, a bit like Florida, because they don't have the air conditioning. All right, so the next one, holiday time. And holiday time, yeah, I know this ruffles a lot of people's feathers in the USA because they hear about us Brits who get at least 28 days a year, 28 in British English, 28 days a year plus of paid leave. And I know for a fact that that isn't the case in the USA. So you can't really beat that, can you? It's like a standardized thing, a legal thing. And also, we have maternity leave, which goes up to about a year. I mean, I'm just amazed at that myself. And they have paternity leave as well. I think paternity leave's just a couple of weeks, but even so, you know, it's still a nice thing for the father to be with their newborn for a couple of weeks, and they get paid, you know. So you can't really argue with that. That's nailed as well. Number 3, holiday leave paid. And I think you could probably find some jobs where we, teachers of course, but please don't yawn over that because we do work hard. There's a plug for the teachers there. But we do get quite a lot of leave. Okay, number 4 is the preserving history part of our culture here. So I noticed in the US that I would be driving around, and I'd say, or someone would say, oh, that's just been knocked down. And then within a matter of weeks, they would have a new building. And I was amazed. I mean, on the one hand, that's an amazing good thing because it means that people don't have to wait so long for their new build houses, or there's a new restaurant coming to town, something like that. It's the growth of the city or the area is enhanced by that speedy building aspect. But over here, we preserve old buildings. So some of them might look really, really, just like people might say, well, why are you preserving that now? It's just falling down. But for the most part, I think they do a very good job of preserving older buildings for the whole character and culture of the whole country. So I can literally just be driving around in a normal place, like a normal village, not even looking for cultural stuff, not even looking for an old building. But just the other day, I went to a football field to watch my little grandson play. Well, he's not so little anymore, but he was playing football, and I just drove to this village, and here was this old Tudor building. I mean, Tudor buildings, how old is that? That's like 700 years ago. And the pebbled street around it. It was amazing to me. So, of course, being out the country for a while, I'm still enamored with that kind of thing. But I always have been. I've always been interested in the old building part of English life. And I did miss it very badly when I was in the States. I used to look around for some old buildings. When we went to Georgia, I saw a few, and no doubt, maybe in the older New England areas of USA, I could probably see a bit more like that. New Hampshire, I don't know. I have a friend in New Hampshire, maybe you could let me know about that. But anyway, yes, definitely the preserving the history, of course, the castles, the palaces, the bigger stuff going on. And when I was living in Devon, there was this place called Clovelly. You could look it up. It was about 15 miles from where I was growing up in Devon, and it was just an amazing place. The whole village is built on this steep hill, and all the roads are pebbled, and all the buildings are old, and they preserved every single one of these terrace houses. Tiny little doorways, tiny, tiny little windows. And you wonder if anyone actually lives in there. They look like doll houses. So yeah, it was just amazing to me to look at those after having been in the States. And so, yeah, remember, we're just looking at the things that Britain, UK have nailed. In this case, actually do better than the Americans. Okay, time for a slurp of my Guinness. Mm. Mm. Can't beat it. Make sure I don't have that frothy stuff. Okay, so I needed that before I talk about number 5. Deep breath. Yes, I'm going to mention it. And yes, I'm going here for this one point. The NHS. So I thought about this when I was trying to decide about moving for the second time, which obviously I'll leave a link for if you want to watch that. But I was planning on and deciding to move back to the USA a second time, and this time over 50, which is a bit more of a bigger deal for me now. But anyway, some of that was in my recent video. But yeah, I mean, just the NHS is just an amazing aspect of British life. We can't deny it. It's definitely a wonderful aspect. Of course, it's not completely free. It's free on the point of use. And I've heard that phrase come up quite a lot recently. But it always has been on the point of use, like calling an ambulance, having to go to hospital, going to the doctors. Prescriptions are £9 unless you've got, some situation where you don't have to pay. But there's no doubt about it. I mean, they were formed in 1948 and they've been going for 77 years. So I just think that you can't beat that. Now, I dearly wish actually, that the USA, the United States could maybe incorporate some of the idea of what we've got over in Britain. Please, please, pretty please. Now, I do know that the states do have, something in place. I see that, for the older people over 65. Forgive me for saying older people, but hopefully not to me. I'll be one of those. So I'm just saying, over 65, that you can actually get some kind of thing similar to the UK, but other ages, anything underneath that, it's more or less health insurance or pay out of pocket, more or less. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I just hope that maybe one day that could be incorporated in. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this rather different video today. I do like to get out and about when I'm filming as well, because I like the variety. I like the backdrop of different places that I'm visiting. I like to share it with you guys. So just one more for the road. By the way, not driving anywhere. I'm enjoying not driving. So all good there. So I am going to say cheerio for now and cheers.